Do you love this time of year, this holiday, wintry time, but you wish that you didn't feel quite so stressed out about it? Or do you dread this time of year, longing for much deeper meaning and more fulfillment? Or maybe you just feel a deep knowing inside of you that there is more to this season than the hustle and bustle and chaos and craziness that seems to go on all around us. If you answered yes to any of these questions, or even if you're just seeking more meaning and joy and peace during the holiday season and during these deepest, darkest nights of winter, you're in the right place. Grab a cup of tea and let's sit back and connect about how we can make the most meaning out of this time of year. I'm Kim Marie, and I am a transformational life coach, supporting people to step into the roles that they know they're capable of stepping into, move beyond their blocks, and move forward, get unstuck, and feel really fulfilled in their life. That said, I think this time of year is unbelievable for helping us to do that. In fact, it's really what started me on my own journey. You see, I always loved this time of year. I always loved the holidays. I always enjoyed them. But growing up, even while my mother made them incredibly magical and beautiful, she was always incredibly stressed out, always very frustrated, always feeling overwhelmed, always feeling exhausted. And I swore that I wasn't going to do that. I didn't want to do that for my family, for myself, or for my children. So I'm going to share with you what I've done, and I'm hoping that perhaps it can give you some inspiration and ideas to making this season really special and really peaceful for you, and to stop the rat race, to get yourself out of the hamster wheel that seems to come with holiday overwhelm. So I'm going to start by sharing a bit of my journey, and I'm going to be looking at some notes, so forgive me if I'm not always looking right at you. But I am so grateful that you're here with me, and I'm so grateful that you're interested in finding more meaning in this time of year. So during my time of growing up, as I said, I really wanted to understand a bit more of what was behind all this season. You know, the celebration, the festivities, you know, why did we decorate? Why did we celebrate? My family wasn't an incredibly religious family, but we did celebrate Christmas, and I knew from things like Sunday school or church school that, you know, it was celebrating the birth of Jesus, and you know, that was part of it. But there was something more, and I could always feel it. But when I was young, I really didn't know much about it at all. So, as I said, I was determined not to buy into the craziness and the chaos. And so even before I had children, when I went away to college, I used to decorate my space, prepare for the holidays, and light lots of candles, enjoy a cozy fire and a warm cup of tea, and really make a ritual out of the time and enjoy the peace and joy that comes with it when I'm relaxing and not buying into that. So I would do things like buy my Christmas presents before Halloween, if you can believe that. Or I would make sure that everything was prepared ahead of time so that I could really sink into the season and enjoy it. So with that said, I started wanting to also, you know, find more ritual and meaning in everything that was going on. So I want to start with just sharing a poem by Robert Frost. And this was a favorite poem of my grandmother's. And it's a poem that I think I didn't understand so much when I was little and she would read it to me as I do now that I understand this time of year. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year, he gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep. But I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. I'm just going to let us sit with that poem living in us and around us as we continue this journey into the darkness and finding the light in the darkness. So this time of year in the Christian tradition is called Advent. And Advent is post-Thanksgiving. For me, Thanksgiving is always this incredible offering. I make a huge feast. I invite people who don't have any place to go or don't have any plans to come over. And so every year it's a little bit different, and I never know what the table gathering is going to be. And I feel like the whole celebration is really one of deep gratitude, harvest, bounty, and kind of celebrating a certain level of freedom and the heritage of our ancestors and all that has come before us. And I know that this is more of a North American tradition, this holiday of Thanksgiving, but personally I think Thanksgiving is something to celebrate every single day. And so I love that meal, and it sort of kicks off, if you will, the holiday season for me. And freedom is something, if I'm celebrating gratitude and freedom, it's something that arises from our individual human spirit. It's something that we feel inside of us, and we want to express ourselves. And I personally find that this time of year is an opportunity to express ourselves because we kind of feel a tendency to automatically want to tune into ourselves. And so this pre-Christmas time that is known as Advent in the Christian tradition really comes from, as so many Christian festivals do, it comes from a more pagan tradition, more indigenous wisdom, where these weeks leading up to the winter solstice, which actually in the Roman times, in the Roman calendar, used to be celebrated on December 25th, which is interesting because, now of course we celebrate Christmas on December 25th. But I love that concept, that these wisdom traditions weave in. And while I grew up Christian, and I definitely have loved my study of like esoteric Christianity and going deeper and understanding some of the deeper meaning behind the festivals and the celebrations, what I've particularly found amazing is my passion for weaving indigenous wisdom and other wisdom traditions into it. And I think we all have to find our own path. And I think there's benefit and magic in this concept of these darkest nights and this idea of an archetypal child that is going to be birthed with the coming of the light, if you will. And we can think of that as the light within us, just as much as it is the return of the sun. So I want to share a bit more about that. This idea of the pre-Christmas time, this was like a preparatory time for the coming of the light. And it's anticipation, it's expectation, it's purification. The veil to the spiritual world is very thin. We feel more connected on many, many levels. So Advent, the word Advent is from the Latin word adventus, which means coming. And it was designated for the coming of Christ in the Christian tradition. And when I look at it archetypally, as I've mentioned, I love to think of it as the coming of the light. That is what it was determined as the pagan tradition. And I tend to think of Christ as like a cosmic consciousness or an archetype that is the ultimate potential for the God-man or the goddess-woman that we can become, that we have the ability to become. And this is what we're birthing. This is what ancient traditions knew we could celebrate. And the sun is like an archetype for this. And of course, winter solstice is our shortest day of the year. It is the day with the least amount of light. And so these times of preparing for that turn in the seasonal wheel that begins to extend the days is something that this time of Advent, or this coming of the light, is a preparation for. It's a celebration for. So in this idea of anticipation, this is like a victory of the sun. And we have an inner sun. Everything macrocosmically also happens microcosmically within us. So we have this inner sun that is always, growing and expanding if we're willing to pay attention to it and touch into it. So we have this idea that during this time we can kind of purify our outer spaces and our inner spaces, open ourselves up to receive this light that is coming. And it's also kind of like, finalizing the soil before a seed is planted, making sure it's all in good order, lots of nourishments, nutrients, the proper balance, if you will, so that seed can thrive. And it's kind of like tending to a pregnancy in a way. We're sort of expectant, if you will. And I also love to think of this time of the year in that way as a return to the mother's womb. It's like an invitation to go into the darkness, to step into the womb. And of course, all is born of the womb, if you will. And that womb is dark and it's fluid and there's a lot of unknown. And for that reason, this time of year can actually bring some depression and anxiety and overwhelm. And I have to say, my favorite thing to do when I am in this mode of preparing and I think about that, and I definitely feel this time of year feeling like there's a lot more unknown and a lot more, like uncertainty within that can feel, can generate anxiety. My favorite thing to do is just imagine, especially when I go to sleep at night, that I'm leaning back into the arms of the mother as if my pillow is like her bosom and I'm resting back on it and her arms just wrap around me and hold me and bring me so much comfort during this time. And I just surrender. And it's like I say, I'm yours. I'm all yours. I'm stepping into that womb space very, very intentionally. And that's what we're going to talk about here in this teaching, is that we can step into this intentionally and actually receive tremendous gifts from it and prepare for this coming of the light that is celebrated, has been celebrated since the beginning of time, really. So with that, some more origins of Advent, if you will. There was also, it's a coming, Advent, I said, came from the word coming, and it became the coming of the light, but it's also a coming away. There used to be a time when people would take the wheels off of their wagons and they literally would not leave. So all of the preparations, all of the food and purchases and exchanges and barters and all of that had to be done beforehand. And they would take the wheels off and they would often decorate them with boughs and greens. And it was about stopping. And instead of allowing the wheels to keep turning and taking us here, there, and everywhere, and the work to go on in the outer world as much, it really became a symbol of this time to turn inward, to kind of incubate. And so we engaged with the feeling of cold or fear or loss or longing, and we really stepped into this place of hope. Advent is very much about hope. This idea of celebrating the coming of the light is very much about hope. And remembering that hope, I think, can help us get through some of the dark times. That is part of what can help us find this light in the darkness, if you will. So it used to be considered that they would sacrifice the wheel, okay? And the term sacrifice comes from the Latin word sacer, which is sacred or holy. So to sacrifice means, and ficio, sacrificio, and ficio is to do or make. So the idea of sacrifice is to make holy. So when we sacrifice our expression in the outer world, we're actually making holy our inner being. We're turning inward. We're sacrificing the wheel so that we can turn inward. And so this is about a question. Are you willing to sacrifice your time to this holiness, to make this time holy? Are you willing to sacrifice your lower self and the things that you don't want to be dealing with anymore to this new birth that is coming, to allow yourself to purify and make room? When we do it with intention, it really becomes incredibly potent. I personally think that the universe has incredible power, that things like that are going to happen anyway to some degree. But I have found that as I make it more and more intentional, as I've brought more meaning to this time of year, the potency with which things unfold is really quite remarkable. I want to share a quote with you from a blogger named Lindsay Mead in her blog, A Design So Vast. She talks about not so much Advent, but most of Advent is in December. Sometimes we have a few days in November. But I'm going to share with you, well, let me back up a little bit first before I share that. So Advent is always 4 Sundays before Christmas. That's how it's celebrated, okay? So you count back. And so sometimes we have 4 full weeks of Advent. Like let's say Christmas falls on a Sunday, and we count back 1, 2, 3, 4 Sundays before Christmas. And then there's, each week of Advent is a full week. But if Christmas falls on a Monday, for example, then the 4th Sunday is the day before Christmas, really. And then we go back to the 3rd, the 2nd, and the 1st. So it could also be very short. So that said, that's how the timing of Advent happens. If in case you didn't know that or understand how that works. Often it ends up being the first Sunday after Thanksgiving, but as in this year 2017, it's actually a week after that Sunday after Thanksgiving. So we're starting it a bit later this year. That said, at least later relative to Thanksgiving. That said, it often falls in December. Most all of Advent is usually in December, and Lindsay Mead spoke of December in this way. December is a holy month. Maybe it is the dark, silky silence that descends so early that speaks to me of reverence. Maybe it is the promise that December holds, that no matter how dark, how cold, how empty it can get, the light is coming back. Something always shifts in me when December arrives. I embrace the darkness, and I am eager for the coming solstice, when the whole world is still and holds its breath, waiting to be reborn again. I think that few sentences sums up this amazing gift that this season holds for all of us. It is very much about rebirth and preparing for this birth. So it's very, very symbolic on so many levels and in so many wisdom traditions. No matter what tradition you practice, it's truly a gift. So I believe that if we take this time, this special time, and ritualize it, we can get so much more out of it. So why? Why should we ritualize this time? Well, first of all, by choosing to ritualize it and have intention, this brings in our will forces. We're making a choice. We're expressing our free will. So it's no longer just a thought. It's no longer just this idea that, oh, Christmas is coming or solstice is coming. So there's that phrase this time of year, right? Peace to all of goodwill. This is a way of really tuning in to our will and bringing goodness to it. It requires effort to bring peace. It doesn't just show up in our lap. We have to tune into the quiet. We have to give it intention. We have to open the door to it, right? If we stay busy and in the craziness, how can we have peace? We have to choose that. So that's one reason for ritualizing. It helps us to sense our inner truths. When we get quiet, we can cultivate spiritual perception. We start to connect on deeper levels. We feel something that's different. I felt this always as a child. I never understood it. I didn't know that the veil was thin between, spirit and matter. I just knew I felt something different. I felt more guided, more connected, more intuitive. Ritualizing Advent allows for living and experiencing the feelings that we otherwise often avoid. So this is about darkness. There's a reason for darkness. There's an opportunity here to return to that womb and take a look at what's there and be with it. Often when we're willing to be with it, one, we can receive gifts out of it. There are, the dark is where all is created from, right? That's the beginning of things. It comes out of this womb. It comes out of this emptiness. That is where creative force comes from. But two, in that darkness, we can often find understanding. You know, sometimes we can tap into what's getting in the way of us actually birthing and moving forward. It allows us to speak directly to the heart, ritualizing this time of year. Making moments holy is urgent in our times. That's another reason to do this, to choose this. We are thwarted at every turn by commercialism. We are lured by busyness, and we get exhausted. And most of us don't want it. We get tired of it. And there is a different way. We also have the imprints of the coming of the light that can be placed in the soul. So by ritualizing this time, we are taking the imprints of this time and the preparation for it and the honoring of all that's come before us and all that stands there for us to guide us and move us forward. So it also, by ritualizing this time, it also helps us to meet the storms that can come in our lives. We often face obstacles and distractions in the purification process. It can be challenging for sure. And the trials can come up around our relationships, our destiny. But we have to face these trials in order to birth the higher. It helps us to find meaning behind everyday events. It honors the natural inbreathing of this time of year. I mentioned already that we tend to feel almost a sense of wanting to go in. This idea of returning to the mother's womb, I've come to see it as this opportunity to return to myself, to return to the mother. It's like an invitation, almost as if she calls me to create yet another layer of my own being. And so it really is this inbreathing honoring. It helps us to keep things in balance and bring perspective and rhythm according to the season. If we're out there going to this party and that party and shopping and doing this activity and that thing and all of that, how is that at all honoring this idea of the rhythm of the year? All of nature honors the idea of the rhythm of the year. If we look outside, everything is going to sleep. It's going in. It's getting quiet. Beneath the soil, there is so much happening. Mother Earth is actually so incredibly awake, doing so much work beneath the surface. And we are part of nature. That means we go below the surface too, if we're willing to. And we can find so much in our own depths. It cultivates wonder and reverence for the mysteries of life. We forget this too often. We forget the magic that's behind things, that's underneath everything. And by turning in and ritualizing this time of year, we really can create something special. It awakens the feminine energies, which we need more of to balance the sorely out of balance energies. We have out of balance masculine and feminine energies so dominant in the world right now. And these positive feminine energies of the womb space, if you will, that can bring healing, new birth, creativity, love, receptivity. These are all cultivated as we go into our depths to bring new life. It's a cleansing and initiation that the feminine brings. It allows for the planting of seeds within our soul. And these seeds await the imprint of the stars for new growth during what I call the sacred nights of winter that happen from December 24th through January 6th. And I'll touch on that at the end of this teaching. But this is like preparing for that seed planting. It's the seeds of our inner potential. It balances the darkness and sleepiness that we feel, which is kind of literal and in the soul. Sometimes we just want to go to sleep. We don't want to even look at what's going on inside. That's the temptation. We either stay so busy out here that we ignore what's going on inside, or we just go to sleep. And so by ritualizing it with intention, ritualizing this season, this time of year with intention, we balance that tendency to want to go to sleep. And it brings expectation. It's kind of a remedy for depression, anxiety, overwhelm, etc. It brings meaning to this time beyond anything I've ever experienced. It helps us to use courage that was cultivated at the time of harvest. Harvest time can be challenging sometimes. It's like we face our dragons as we try to harvest the fruits of our being. And we've maybe been fortified with this courage. I've spoken about that in some different blog posts that I've written. But this courage gets to be, used, and the courage can serve as this watchful eye that can keep us from going into too much isolation or overstimulation, okay? It deepens our relationship to the whole of the world and the universe. We're going to touch on how these weeks of Advent actually help us to connect with nature on a deeper level, the kingdoms of nature, what supports us, what needs us, and what we need. And also it helps us to tune into the cosmos and the rhythm of the year and start becoming more a part of it. I think we've separated ourselves out so much. Our modern culture tries to dominate nature instead of embrace and be a part of it. So those are all really powerful reasons to ritualize this incredible time of year. So I hope that at least one of them convinces you that it's a worthwhile practice to take up. So how do we practice? How do we do this? How do we ritualize these 4 weeks? Okay. Well, it wasn't until I had children that I began to see a lot of different ways of ritualizing. And I'm very grateful. My children attend a Waldorf school. And I'm so grateful to Waldorf education because it really helped me to start paying attention to these ideas of the rhythm of the year and the festivals of the seasons and how we can work with them consciously. The children don't know this. The children don't understand what's really happening. But there are these festivals throughout the course of the year. And one of the most magical festivals, as I said, I had already chosen to make this time of year quiet with lots of candlelight in my own home, even before I had children, shopping early and making it special. But when I had children and they attended what is called the Advent Spiral in their kindergarten is when they first experienced it, I still get chills thinking about it. It makes me want to cry. It is the most beautiful, potent, amazing journey that these children take, and the meaning that they don't understand. My gosh, in kindergarten they don't get it, but it is putting an imprint into their soul. And let me tell you, it put an imprint into mine as well. And I thought, okay, I need to understand this meaning. And this is what took me even deeper. It's like my children came and took me even deeper into the meaning of this year. The Advent Spiral is this space that's laid out with a spiral of greens, evergreens, live evergreens that are fragrant. And the children are guided by an angel. It's totally pitch dark in the room when it begins. And this angel in white comes in and lights a candle. And she walks the spiral into the center and she lights the candle in the center and comes back out. And then one by one, the children walk. They walk in with an apple that represents new life, that represents abundance. And the apple it's been hollowed out a little bit and it has a little beeswax candle in the center. And they take this apple with their candle in it, and they walk the spiral, and they tip at the candle to light it in the center, to light their little candle with the light of life, right? The light in the darkness. And they walk slowly out of the spiral, and they get to choose a place on the spiral along the edge of the evergreens where they can put down their apple and their candle and let it continue to light. So by the time the entire class has gone and lit their candles, you have now the room lit up with these candles along the spiral of evergreens. And it is the most magnificent sight I think I've ever seen, truly. It's so beautiful. And the symbolism of it, the understanding of, some children take their light out only a little bit. Some children walk almost to the end of the spiral and they put their candle down finally. But the whole spiral gets lit up. And it's about taking it from the depths, going into the depths of our being, spiraling inward, finding that light in the darkness and bringing it out into the world. It's a whole symbolic imprint that our soul is receiving that we can do. And so that concept had me wanting to understand, what is an Advent wreath, for example? Why do we have Advent wreaths? What are they really about? And of course, I already shared the idea of the wagon wheel being decorated with boughs and greenery. But ultimately, the Advent wreath, typically there are 4 candles on the wreath. And I think in the Catholic tradition, those candles are all pink with a purple one. Forgive me, I don't know exactly, because I've never celebrated with an Advent wreath in that particular way. I actually just choose to make an Advent wreath of greens, and I have 4 candles, and they're usually all red beeswax candles. That's what I choose to do. But each candle is representative of one of the kingdoms of nature. And in celebrating Advent in this way, with each week, 1 candle being lit, and then 2 candles in the second week, 3 candles in the third week, and 4 candles starting in the 4th week. Each kingdom of nature is celebrated with those. So the first light of Advent is the light of stones. And there's a little verse that the children would say with this. The first light of Advent, it is the light of stones, the light that shines in seashells, crystals, and in bones. And in going deeper and connecting with the stones, indigenous wisdom would say the stone people, and that the stones hold our history, that they've been here longer than anything. And there's this idea that, when you hold a stone, you hear that phrase, stone cold, right? And yet, when we warm a stone, it will hold the heat and even cook something for us once it's warmed in the rocks and the coals, right? So there's this concept that the stones have sacrificed their warmth for us. This idea of looking at nature and understanding the kingdoms of nature as part of something that has given us so much is such a powerful way for us to connect, to reconnect to our roots, to who we are, to where we've come from, and all that has been sacrificed for us to be here. So this idea that we can give warmth back to the stones. I remember after practicing this for a few years, I was doing some yard work and moving some stones around. And I remember holding a stone in my hand and thinking, wow, the warmth even of my body, of my hand, is something that touches the stone. And it's like I could feel something in that. I could feel almost a gratitude coming from the stone. And I know that may sound crazy, but you know what? This is my experience of it. You may have a totally different experience. But I felt a deeper connection with the stone people and a deeper love for crystals and for our bones and how the minerals that nourish us all the time and how they're created and what they've given up for us. Okay? And there's a little song also that the children sing, and it's one little candle lighted in the wreath, the earth below begins to glow. So it's again celebrating this earth, the solidity, the physicality of our being. This is, the bones, the structure, the framework of our being. It's the foundation upon which we stand. So I, with my children, will light that first candle in the wreath each night, and we'll say those verses and sing the little verse of the tune, even now when my children are teenagers. So it's a special way to connect. And then in the second week, it's celebrating the plant kingdom. This is a lovely thought to think of the shift from what the stones have to what the plants have. Now the plants, the stones are pretty stagnant. They don't move. The plants, they grow roots, they grow branches and blossoms, they open themselves up to the sun. And think of a sunflower to be the most obvious, but they literally follow the sun. If you have a plant in your window, you can see that the plants will tend to grow more on one side toward the sunlight of the window than they will on the other. Plants naturally are seeking light, which is actually what they sacrificed. They sacrificed light for us to have light within us. They don't have light within. They have to seek it in order to survive. They plant roots. They have not mobility yet, right? But they have a sense of growth, expansion, life forces. There are buds and pine cones and branches and things that we could put on our Advent wreath. Often I'll put on the wreath in one little section for the stones, I'll put some shells or crystals, and then next to the candle that's for the plant kingdom, I'll put some buds or a pine cone or something special that represents the plant kingdom. Again, tuning into what the plants give us, and think of all of the food and nourishment that we get from plants, the life force. The plants represent life force. And there are a lot of philosophies that believe it's not really vitamins and minerals, so to speak, that we're eating in the plants, but rather it's life force that we're getting, and that our own bodies often can create their own minerals and vitamins in a healthy state, just as the plants and stones can as well, but that it's the life force that we receive. And so by tuning into this kingdom of plants, we begin to tune in more deeply to our own nourishment, where our sense of life and our energy comes from. In week 3, we move to celebrate the animal kingdom. During this week, I might put like tufts of wool, or perhaps a little beeswax or a honeycomb, or maybe little figurines of animals on the wreath, and just to honor the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom, of course, moves. There's mobility with the animals. They can move about. They have this instinctual nature that tells them when to go and where to go. And, it's like that's a beneficial thing. And it can also be, let's face it, in the animal kingdom, there's some intensity. Animals can tear each other apart in their survival, right? In their instincts. And so the beauty of tapping into all these kingdoms of nature is that we have them all within us. That is something so important to remember, right? We have this knowing, this depth of memory and understanding of the stones and these minerals and this structure and foundation. We have the life force and the nourishment and the capacity to seek light and to find light within us, in our case. We have instincts. We have the ability to tear somebody up or nurture them and feed them and tend them in the ways that the animal kingdom does. They sacrificed speech. Animals can't speak to each other. There's an old tradition that says if you sing to the animals on Christmas Eve, they'll talk back to you. And I wondered where that came from. I'd heard that when I was a kid growing up near a farm, and I actually sometimes would go and sing to the horses across the street from my grandparents. And it's interesting to think about that idea, that maybe the ancient idea is that they don't have speech. We have speech instead, and we can be grateful to them also for their nourishment, for their warmth, the hides that they provide, the food that they provide. It's quite remarkable when we stop and have gratitude for these kingdoms of nature. And of course, the 4th week is the human kingdom, the kingdom of human beings. This is about ennobling ourselves and the earth to bring forth our I am self, our highest self, our Christed self, we could call it, that archetypal cosmic consciousness that is a Christed self, okay? The light within. It's about learning to sacrifice ourselves for the sake of all. We talked about these sacrifices that the other kingdoms of nature have made and allowed for the subsequent kingdoms. I mean, this is kind of, a progression from the stone to the plant to the animal with its mobility to us. We have all of those things. We have the mobility, we have the instincts, we have the life force and the capacity to plant roots and reach for the stars. And we have the capacity for that memory and that structure. But here's what no other kingdom has. We are not, I really believe this, we are not simply higher animals. We are the kingdom of humanity. Human beings have the capacity to reason. We have the capacity to bring forth this I am and to choose in freedom beyond instinctual nature. Yes, animals have feelings, and they respond to those feelings instinctually. We can actually choose how we respond to our feelings. We have the capacity to reason and understand more about those feelings. Going into this time of year in this ritualistic way, lighting Advent wreaths, and I'll share some other tools, it's remarkable what we can do to bring more joy and understanding about our connection to the whole of life. So during this time on the wreath, I might put a little child figurine, this idea of our humanness, our purity that we aspire to, and this true balance of love and wisdom and truth, of our thinking, our feeling, and our willing, all united in harmony, in coherence, aligned with something so much bigger than we are. So I want to share just a few little family practices that you can do. You can do some of these things alone, or you can do them with a whole entire family. You can do them with friends, anything that you want to. So story time, of course, is great. There are a number of wonderful books and stories that you can work with. You can probably just Google, Advent stories and find all kinds of things. The wreath lighting, as I've already mentioned, is a wonderful tool. Songs, there are lots of songs to sing during these times. I'll finish the singing of the verse that I was singing before. So it was, one little candle lighted in the wreath, the earth below begins to glow. Two little candles lighted in the wreath, the plant lifts up a blossom cup. Three little candles lighted in the wreath, the animals run to greet the sun. Four little candles lighted in the wreath, the child is born on Christmas morn. And so the other aspect of the verses, we talked about the first light of Advent, the light of stones, the light that lives in seashells, crystals, and bones. The second light of Advent is the light of plants, plants that reach up to the sun and in the breezes dance. The third light of Advent, it is the light of beasts, the light of hope that we may find in greatest and in least. And the fourth light of Advent, it is the light of humankind, the light of love and understanding that we may find. So that's just an example of a song and a verse that you can keep in mind. And some of these are sweet children verses, but you know what? They put an incredible imprint in my soul for sure as an adult, and I hope that they can do the same for you. There is time and silence that we can do as a practice. After those Advent wreath or spiral times with my children, we would come home and I would very intentionally not turn on any lights, only candlelight, even to brush their teeth by, to get into bed for the evening, only candlelight. So having time in silence, in darkness, bringing a sense of agreement for reverence to your entire family. It's a beautiful family practice to have certain nights that's what you do. You read by candlelight or just sing or snuggle and enjoy a fire and some quiet time. Personal practices can include things like journaling, certainly slowing down and simplifying. You can take this time. A lot of times people, they bake and prepare. It is that time of preparation, as I said, but it can also be, sometimes people choose to clean and purge and sort and use that quiet time to really focus on what's important and move things out so that new things can come with the new year and the new birth. So various tools that you might want to include during this time, as I've mentioned already, the Advent wreath, songbooks. Calendars, Advent calendars are very popular, and typically they've been things like, you know, candies and or just, you know, a lot of times you get those pop open things where the windows, you know, they open with something. I love those. I remember an 8th grade class once making an Advent calendar with the pop open windows, but what was particularly special about this calendar was that there was a little part of a story to read each night associated with the window that you were popping open, and the image that popped that you saw when you opened the little Advent calendar window was associated with what you were reading for the night. So it's particularly special when you can have a story that goes with an Advent calendar. I myself, I started out with what I call a pocket elf. And it's an elf with 24 pockets. And in each of the pockets, each year I often did something different. I've done scavenger hunts where I would put a little note in each pocket, and each day the children, I have 2 boys, and they would take turns picking the pocket, and they would help each other find the thing that they were doing. I've done another fun thing, if you are computer savvy or like to work with images, I took a bunch of images of vintage Christmas or holiday postcards and sized them down to all be about this, you know, this size, rectangles. And so I put one in each of the pockets, and then I had a string with some bells hanging and little tiny they look like little tiny miniature clothespins on the string, and the children would pick an image and hang the image, you know, opposite each other down both sides of the string with these clips. And by the end we had this lovely garland of these beautiful images. Another thing I did was take a Christmas puzzle and put a couple pieces, you know, into each pocket so that they could gradually make the puzzle throughout Advent. And another time we did like a fairy garden, if you will, and I would put miniature things in them so that over the course of Advent they were building out this little garden. There are so many things that you can be creative with in terms of having pockets. And I've done the treats thing too. You know, when I haven't had a lot of time to prep for things, I've done maybe a few little treasures and then some treats, and mixed it up and just had a variety of things in the pockets. But the idea behind the Advent calendar is that there is this anticipation, there's this building up, there's this expectant nature, this pregnant nature of building up to the ultimate day of Christmas, or the ultimate day of solstice, if that's what you celebrate. So this can be a really special way to celebrate the time, is to have these calendars. Another thing that I do, and I had made this one year, is a needle felted calendar with an image, a lovely image, and there are stars, and this little angel carrying a baby would move from star to star. I would put a little piece of Velcro on the back of the angel, and it moves from star to star each day until it's placed in the arms of its mother at the end, and the birth happens, which is also really fun. The children loved to move the angel. So there are just so many wonderful, magical things that you can do. Other tools are nature tables. You know, you can put maybe some items, like I was saying on the wreath, you could do that with a nature table where you have some items from the kingdoms of nature that you put on each week and add to it and build out a scene. I have like a nativity that I put on a nature table, and I actually have a backdrop of a dark blue cloth, and then I put gold star stickers on it, one each day, so that by the time Christmas comes, there's this whole starry night above the scene that I create. And I add things like some pretty crystals, and then some plant representations, and then I bring in the animals, and then I bring in the people. And so that's also a lovely way to do this. You can also create your own spiral, Advent spiral, and invite the community to come and walk it. You can work with a journal. You can light candles, make gifts, do some baking, be creative. Go to music concerts, enjoy some live music. We have certain things that we pick and choose each year that are just, you know, food for the soul to keep us in this beautiful, reverent space of making the season magical. And you know, working with children and grandchildren during this time can also be incredibly magical, because it can deepen your own magic. It brings them reverence. to what's happening in the season. It gives them something more than just seeing us run around and be crazy about it. It engages their will to participate, and it cultivates a relationship with spirit for them. So this is a really beautiful, special gift for children if you're a parent as well. So that is how I celebrate this special time of year, this Advent season, this coming of the light, this preparatory time of purification and connection and renewal. I hope that you've found some wonderful things in it. I want to share with you that the most exciting reason to make this special time of year ritualistic, to be more attentive to it and to pay attention to it, is that it prepares you for that seed that gets planted within you, for the coming of the light. Remember, I said that the Advent time is kind of like going into the womb space, meeting the darkness and doing it intentionally. Well, that is all there so that the birth can happen, so that spark of light can be received by you. And you can think of that time as preparing for that. And then on Christmas, or in some cases people might think of it as solstice, which, as I mentioned before, solstice and Christmas used to be celebrated on the same day. You can think of that time as the opportunity to tend that seed within you. So that whole Advent time prepares you to tend the seed during what I call the sacred nights of winter. The sacred nights of winter are Christmas Eve through January 6th, which is a festival known as Epiphany. And that's 13 sacred nights and days. And I have created a journal for working with those nights and tending that seed. It is called my Sacred Nights of Winter Journal. And this is a full color, beautiful journal with amazing imagery. And I know you can't see it too well on the screen, but it's 100 pages of full color pages for you to journal, lots of space for you to write and contemplate, journaling prompts. Each year, I've done this is my 4th edition. I've worked with the journal for 13 years. This is my 4th edition of creating my own journal publication. And you can find out more information about the journal at kimmariecoaching.com/sacred nights. On that page, it'll go into detail about why working with these sacred nights can be so special and so powerful for you. I've already shared with you in this video why the pre-season, the coming of the light season, is so helpful in preparing for this time. But more importantly, this time in particular, this journal, when you work with this journal and you embrace these sacred nights of winter, you actually are creating a guidebook for yourself. This becomes a guidebook for your year that, through the messages that you receive, the exercises and journaling prompts that I offer, you end up creating something that can serve to help you navigate and meet the challenges and opportunities of the coming year. I don't know of any other process that does that. That is why I love this time of year so much. That is why I came on here to share these teachings with you. I really hope that you'll take it up and make this time of year extra special for you and your family. Again, you can find the journal for the Sacred Nights of Winter at kimmariecoaching.com/sacred nights. And I hope you'll take a look. I hope you'll order your journal. And I hope you and your family have the most blessed and joyous and peaceful holiday season. Take care.